Council meeting for February 24th, 2025. May I have the meeting called to order starting at 2 p.m. If I could have a mover. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. We're going to jump right into close. The recommendations that a closed meeting be held on February 24th, 2025 at 2 p.m. at the Wilmot Administrative Complex in accordance with Section 239(2)F of the Municipal Act 2001 to consider the following: Fire Service Apparatus Section 239(2)F, and there should be another one. Thank you. As well as striking a committee, Section 239(2)B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. May I have a mover for that, please? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. We should return once closed is completed. I will call for a motion to reconvene in open session at 2:29 p.m. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. I will turn it over to Councillor Sadhu for our land acknowledgement, please.
We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between the Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you very much, Councillor. There are no additions to the agenda, and the recommendation is that the agenda be adopted as presented for February 24th, 2025. May I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest, councillors? Seeing none, we have our minutes from our January 27th special council meeting to be adopted as presented. May I have a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. And all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. There are no correspondence for special council. So we will jump into our reports. Our first report is the main budget motion. I just want to clarify kind of the process of what today will look like. So we will get the motion on the floor, and then all following reports, as well as any amendments that anybody has to add or make, will then be treated as an amendment to the motion. So we won't be voting on the main motion until we've dispensed of all other items, but we will get it on the floor first and then discuss everything else essentially as an amendment. With that, we do have the other two items that are coming back for information or I guess 3 items that are coming back for information, being the capital budget, the capital plan, cost of living, which we need to still discuss, and the 5% information. However, there is, at the end of going through all of that, an opportunity if council has other questions or items that aren't covered in those reports that they would like to see amended to the budget. You will have the opportunity to do that before we do vote on the final budget motion. So just so that everyone's on the same page of kind of how the afternoon will pan out. In the event that this runs right up to our regular meeting time, we will pause from this and then go into our regular council meeting and then come back. I think that kind of goes over the general layout of what this afternoon will look like. So with that in mind, to get the recommendation on the floor, I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder that the 2025 operating budget be approved at a gross expenditure budget for $29,287.07. My goodness, I can't read numbers right now. I'm very sorry. Everybody, we're gonna pause and rewind. $29,387,701 with a 2025 property tax and payment in lieu of tax levy requirement of $14,539,582, or a 19.11% over 2024 tax increase. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. The other thing, just for those watching along and for council's reminder, the motion that is now on the floor is conclusive of all of the work that council has done to this point on the budget, including the 9% for capital for this year, as well as the plan that the 9% motion had over 4 years. But the 9% has been included in that, as well as all of the other cuts that council has made thus far. So, does council have any questions on the process at this point in time, or are we good to dive into the next set of reports and continue our work on this? Councillor Cressman.
I assume there's a 2.21 overage on the capital on the 9%, so that will be discussed when we discuss the capital portion, correct?
That is correct, yes. Okay, so jumping into report 10.1.1, this is the 5% department-specific operating budget reduction. So staff were directed to identify and propose a 5% reduction to departmental tax-supported operating budgets as presented in the 2025 budget. Acting CAO, Director of Corporate Services, and CFO Greg Clark will provide an overview of the report that staff have brought back. I will turn it over to Director Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, to Council. And just as a reminder to Council, when we're looking at this list, these are items that have been prepared for by staff and brought to Council. They're not inclusive of the 19.11 that the Mayor just reiterated, so these have not been incorporated into the budget in any way in terms of reductions or increases in revenue. Based on Council's direction, staff went away and worked on identifying opportunities or areas that we could bring back for proposal to Council. We each individually looked at our own areas as well as compared each other's to make sure we were in the same type of ballpark in terms of what we were considering. And those proposals are for you. That there's a list there of a large number of items, but they basically fall into three buckets. There's some items that are going to impact employee engagement in that reduction in funding for celebration and summer barbecue events related to staff, as well as some funding for corporate training and development, which is held in the CAO's office to do things like leadership training or development of different skill sets within the organization. That's $14,500 in total for those. The next area is level of service change. So these are items that would see departments change the level of service provided. So in my area in finance, we're proposing the potential to charge $2.50 per paper bill that we mail out to citizens. Given that they can access e-billing, this would reduce our postage, paper, envelopes, staff time, and provide us with funding to offset that until the full transition. As well, there's other recommendations in here related to community grants, fire training, and some other items, economic development related, that would see a reduced level of service. So these are things that the township could stop doing or not do or start doing in the case of revenue, and would be able to be easily managed in terms of service change. The last group are items that are identified as a risk of an operating deficit. Essentially, what we would be doing is adjusting expense line items or revenue items to account for the potential for getting costs down or revenue up, with significant risk in that if those expectations don't come out or come to fruition, that we would run a deficit in the organization. So in 2023, we ran a slight surplus of about $75,000 across the organization. 2024 is probably going to be in a similar expected range, plus or minus $100,000 from being even. And so by introducing these, we increase the risk that the township will run an operating deficit. Given our low level of operating contingency reserves and other sources of revenue, this would have a significant follow-through impact on future years, in that we would have to make up that revenue in some other way in future years if we did run a deficit. So these are items that staff have put together. I do want to caution that there's a level of risk with all of these, and that's why they weren't initially provided as recommendations from staff. These are in response to the direction from council to potentially find an additional 5% reduction in tax requirements.
Thank you very much, Director Clark. Councillors, are there questions at this point in time? Councillor Cressman.
Yes, the one about paper billing, how long would that take to implement? Bank statements I used to get monthly, and I was told I would have to pay, through you, Mayor, I would have to pay $2 to get a paper statement. Eventually, for a while, I was willing to pay that, and for a while, and then eventually they said it's no longer an option. You can't get paper statements. So I would see that as something that we could transition into I don't think you can do it overnight, and that would require people to be made aware of it and the options, but would it improve efficiencies?
So through you, Mayor, to the councillor, you're looking at probably 60 to 90 days, depending on which billing cycle, to implement something like that. So we bill water and wastewater bi-monthly, and then taxes are on a bit of a different schedule. So you would be looking at a bit of time to implement it. The biggest risk with this one, to your point, is that we could see a significant uptake in online e-billing requests, and there'd be a lot of demand to get people set up, and so we could have a huge influx if we tried to do it very quickly. Giving people heads up and proposing that this would be a January 1st, 2026 implementation would give us time to get people educated and uptake. However, then the revenue wouldn't come in 2025. So it is a trade-off. If we did it quickly, there would probably be, I wouldn't want to say chaos, but there would be definitely an increased demand on the service team to get a large number of people set up in a short period of time.
Councillor Cressman for a follow-up.
Just to follow up on that, at the end of the day, once that transition is made, would it provide a more streamlined approach for billing and sending out invoices to residents?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, ideally having more electronic bills. It's, from our perspective, the system creates a file and sends out the emails. It is a much more efficient. It's not, I don't want to promise that it's a great system, so there's no self-serve access, there's no, accounts. It's just a bill goes out, but it is definitely an improvement over having to print bills, sit in a copy room, fold them, put them in envelopes, and get them mailed out. Yeah.
I do have a bit of a list here. Councillor Dunstall and then Councillor Stu after.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Actually, that was going to be my question, was on the mailing of the bills. So that's fine. It's been answered. Thank you.
Councillor Stu.
Yeah, just a bit of a clarification. My understanding was we were hoping to get a 5% reduction per department. Is that the exercise that happened, or was it was staff aiming to achieve a 5% total reduction?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, the goal when we started it out in the way that we structured it was each department, we looked at what 5% would be. So for every one of the departments listed here, we identified what that number is. So it ranged anywhere from 15 to 20,000 to 150,000 per department. We identified the 5%. At the end of the day, each department went through and looked at the opportunities and the places where they could. And some were closer to 5%. Some, there's not the area to get to 5% within those areas. So at the end of the day, it wasn't an overall target that we were looking for. We were looking department by department. We've just reflected here the overall corporate impact to show council. 5% in Director O'Cafra's area is a very different number than 5% in Director Mullenhouse's area. So we wanted to bring it back to the holistic view of the entire budget and what 5% represents there.
So, councillors, just a reminder that none of these items are currently included in, they are currently a part of the budget. So none of these cost savings have been taken out, I guess. So with that, I would look, does council either want to bring forward items on this, or would you prefer that we go through the entire list? I'm just wondering if council wants to identify things. Councillor Wilkinson, though, and then we'll go to Councillor Dunstan.
Sorry, through the chair, I had a few questions on some specific items, but maybe as a starting point, a follow-up on the paper tax and utility bills. I'm just curious how many bills we're sending out in total. I think it's, I want to say 8,000-ish in terms of households. I could be wrong. But how many folks do we have on e-billing as it stands right now?
Just giving staff one moment here to pull up the number.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. Where's that in here? So, including utility and tax bills, we send out about 31,200 bills a year.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Sorry, through the chair, and what percentage of households, or I guess how many of those are e-bill versus paper bill?
Through you, that's the list, the number of paper bills that we send out is 31,200.
I think the question, do we have the breakdown though of how many houses are on e-billing, like the populace?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe e-billing represents about 10% of our total, so maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people are getting e-billings versus the 31,000 paper bills.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, can I come back to you? We're going to stick to a 2-question and then loop back so that everybody has a chance to speak. So we'll go to Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. CAO Clark. I just wanted to double check my math. So the report comes back with a collective 3.5% decrease. And when I'm looking at that for a $5,000 tax bill, that would be $50.75 a year, which would be $4.23, or an $8,000 bill would be or something like $679 per month. Is that about right when you're looking at your numbers?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, yes, that's approximately the impact on an average household.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, there was a line item under community services that says reduce park seasonal. Just curious if there's some elaboration on that, please.
Through you, Mayor Solomon, to Councillor Wilkinson, that would include 2 park seasonal from April through to the beginning of September, looking at horticulture as well as special event setups. They're there as well to help offset our full-time staff complement when it comes to other duties with facilities and maintenance that goes on.
Through the chair, just to clarify, you're referring to staff members, like hours, and okay.
Any other questions, councillors? If not, I'll go back. Okay, Councillor Cressman.
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Director Catania. ICE rental revenue of 50,000, what percentage increase would this be in terms of that type of number? Like, is it a 5% increase in what rentals they'd have to pay? Is it a 10% increase?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Cressman, from a percentage point of view, it wouldn't be so much of a rate change per se. It'd be more for the volume of permits that we have. We actually have been generating a lot more revenue through our I'd say a lot more, but we've been maximizing our revenue through some of the daytime hours. So when we look at permitting out our ice rinks, the prime time ice from 5 p.m. till 11 p.m. is always full. It's maximizing some of the daytime hours, public shinnies, school rentals, other groups that might come in that we believe that we can hit this target. The reason why I've also included this in here is we are expecting a shorter capital project time with our refrigeration plant in the spring. So when we condense that, we're able to start the ice plant up even sooner and generate some more revenue.
Follow-up question, Councillor?
Yes, just for clarity on that, you think this number is very doable then? Is that what or are you saying the repairs that are needed make it challenging? Sorry, I didn't quite hear you. My wife tells me I need hearing aids, so sorry.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Crespin, no, that's correct. This is attainable. We can achieve that target. I know that Acting CAO Clark has talked about risk of operating deficit. That is true, but we've refined some of the numbers where we think we can achieve that target.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Yes, through the chair to Chief Leeson, looking at your budget items here, emergency call-out. Can you elaborate on that one for me, please?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilkinson, that would be reducing that budget line by 5%. That's making the assumption that we wouldn't run as many calls, but that's purely a crystal ball thing. We were just trying to provide that 5% number for you.
Through the chair, I guess I mean more, could you elaborate on what emergency call-out is as a service?
So, yeah, through the chair, that would be any calls to service, fire calls of any description, medical calls, motor vehicle collisions, any type of call where the pager goes off and we have to respond to an emergency itself, a real emergency.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I guess the question is how exactly do we reduce that? I mean, I suppose we have a liability or an expectation to respond to certain calls, right? Like that will never change.
Through the chair, we were asked to reduce the budget by 5%. We looked at some areas where we could take, that would be a risk on council to decide. It's a risk of an operating deficit, so we provided you with those numbers. Again, it's a council decision on the level of service, and I've offered you these numbers to the best of my ability. I wouldn't recommend you do it, but they're there for your discretion.
Councillor Cressman.
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Chief Leeson, the training budget of $15,045 reduction is, we are mandated to train to our volunteers, and this would be, I don't know what I would use, abdicating that responsibility or not meeting that requirement. Is that what this represents?
Through the chair to Councillor Cressman, that's correct. We are mandated to meet the requirements by July 2026. Just to help council understand a little better what we do each year and the community, we actually, if I took the total number of firefighters that required certification and put that number in front of council every year, my budget request would be significantly higher. So we've been spreading this over a number of years leading up to the 2026 deadline so that we're only asking for a portion every year thereof. So the goal is by next year, we will have all the appropriate people certified by that time. Assuming there's no reduction in our training budget this year, we will be on track to meet that requirement.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, not necessarily a question, but I guess an observation. I mean, I'm looking at this, there was maybe just part-time hours or part-time staff positions that were considered. I'll be honest, much along the lines of Councillor Sadhu's observation, I was expecting to see a more robust analysis take place and see a number that was going to be potentially a lot higher than 3.5% in levy reduction. So, to be honest, not overly pleased with the report returned. I mean, I get it's a challenging exercise, but it's meant to be. With that said, I would move to include all of these items and reduce the proposed levy by 3.5%.
Okay, so we have a motion then to include all of these cost-saving items. Is there a seconder to that motion? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Comments or questions on the motion? Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I haven't asked any questions. From my point of view, the staff are working very hard. If we're talking about fire service, I attended a breakfast on Family Day that the fire department put on in order to raise money for, correct me, Chief Leeson, I believe it's a stretcher, is that right? Some kind of a stretcher for carrying out of, wooded areas, or I may have got that wrong, but yeah, okay. So I just saw the enthusiasm and the hard work, the volunteerism that our fire department was doing to raise money for equipment. I see other departments where staff are working hard, volunteering their time. Canada Day is another example. So I guess I would not be in favor of going through with this motion.
Thank you, Councillor, and glad you got tickets to the fire breakfast. I did not, unfortunately. They were already sold out. But Councillor Cressman.
Yes, just in terms of, through you, Mayor, of process, I, for one, am in favor of the moving away from paper billing to online billing. So if I vote against this, where does that put me in some of these other finer details? I see the $50,000 that community service is looking at as doable. I see the this online billing versus paper billing as moving in that direction as a progressive step. And so I guess I'm at a conundrum whether that's still that can be still on the table or whether.
Yes, so Councillor Cressman, what I would suggest is if, and this would be for any councillor, if no councillor is comfortable with every single item on here, then vote not in favor, because any item can still be brought forward as a motion separate of this. So if this were to be defeated, it doesn't remove your options from still having some of these, so long as that's the will of council. And if it does pass, then obviously all of those items would be included as the will of council. Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I agree with you, Councillor Cressman, on the paperless billing. And actually, last year in our budget, I went to paperless billing because of what was said in our budget last year. I'd like to ask all of council if everybody has gone to paperless billing, but maybe Mayor Salonen would say I'm being, or maybe Clerk Boss would say I'm being inappropriate. But that would be my question to all of council. Have we all gone to paperless billing? I would like to see that. I think that's great. But I also know there are some people that can't. There are some people, not everybody has a computer.
I will maybe leave that for a question that your colleagues can answer to you. I certainly appreciate the spirit. I do just want to stay focused on directly the items before council. But also, I think if councillors, if some of you are not on paperless billing, I think the note has been made that you should be. Councillor Dunstall, do you have your hand up there? Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that this council had an opportunity to cut by almost 1%, and we chose not to. So I find it a
Councillor,
little
I'd remind you
hypocritical.
decisions that have been made of council have
That's
been made of
absolutely
all of
correct, Mayor.
council.
I'm just making a statement. I'm
And I will
giving my
remind
opinion,
everyone
which I think
that
I'm
we
quite,
don't make
willing to
statements
do, and
against
it's out there, and
decisions
thank you
that
for your
have
time.
been made of council. That is in our code of conduct. Once council has made a decision, it is a decision of council. Councillor Cressman?
A point of clarification, I thought that the idea of a budget item is still on the table until the budget is passed. They're still in play.
That's fair, but there is no motion that has been brought forward that has been separate. So at this point in time, it stands as a decision of council.
Okay.
It would have to be, a motion would have to be brought forward to reconsider, and at which point then it would be appropriate to discuss.
I can't, so we would have to go through each of the things that have been eliminated from the capital budget as a motion to reconsider?
Correct.
The ones that have been deferred to meet the 9% target, those are all put together in a motion to reconsider.
Sorry, I'm a little bit confused because that was direction to staff, the 9%. So staff went and changed that. But there are items that council directly made motions on and voted on that are direction of council that would have to go under reconsideration. But items that staff have taken and proposed in the 9%, council can make changes to. It's slightly different because one is direction that's been under staff, one is council actually making a decision on a particular item that has been brought forward, which would require a reconsideration of council, if that makes sense.
Sounds like we're splitting hairs, but I'll leave it there.
The procedural bylaw is semantics, I will, unless the clerk has a different interpretation than I do. No, okay, the clerk agrees. So again, right now we have on the floor currently a motion to include all of these items. Are there any other questions or comment on what's currently on the floor? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that is defeated. I think just for ease, because there is interest in some of these items, I'm just going to quickly run through each item and see if a councillor would like to bring forward an amendment to have that item added. So we will go through that way, essentially kind of what we've done with capital and our other items before this, if it's something that council wants to consider. So starting with council, with mayor and council, the contingency budget. Is there anyone who would like to pull that item? Councillor Wilkinson? Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Sadhu? Actually, logistically, to make this easier, clerk, if you will indulge me, and Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Sadhu, I'm assuming both of you would be moving a motion for each item. Would you be comfortable being the mover and seconder for every single item so that we don't need to get a new mover and seconder each time and we can just go through and make the vote? We did it at regional council, but I'm looking for ease.
Through the chair, I'd be comfortable with that.
Councillor Sadhu? Okay, very good. So now we will just go through each item. Does anybody want to talk on the mayor and council budget contingency item? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. And just keep in mind, it's voting to take out of the budget is what we're voting on. So all those in favor of removing from the budget? And all those opposed? And that is defeated. Office of the CAO, staff appreciation events. All those in favor of removing? All those opposed? That is defeated. Contingency budget, all those in favor of removing? All those opposed? That is defeated. Corporate training and development, all those in favor of removing? All those opposed? And that is defeated. Corporate services, fee for paper tax and utility bills. Revenue, so this is the $50,000. All those in, yes, Councillor Martin.
I have a question on this. So I'm still in favor of moving forward on paperless billing, but hasn't staff, what would this look like? Like, that would be different than the staff recommending that people go to paperless billing. Is that right? Or we would just be saying everybody has to go paperless?
So it's not forcing everyone, it's putting a $2.50 fee, and what's being budgeted here is a revenue from that fee being collected. And I mean, as a corporation, we are encouraging people to switch to paperless billing prior to this anyways. Councillor Cressman?
Through you, Mayor, on this item, there would also be saving on postage and envelopes as well, would there not?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. So if you did the calculation, $2.50 times every bill, it's obviously a much bigger number than 50,000. 50,000 represents our cost of postage, and so what we're trying to do is get it to a net zero impact, that whatever we mail out, we're covering with fees. And so that's sort of the way we came up with this budget, is to try to, without eliminating our expense that we're going to have because we still need to mail them out, generate enough revenue to offset it and bring it to zero in the short term.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I mean, I'm in favor of this this move. Essentially what we're saying is that if you choose to still receive paper bills, it will cost you. So if you use that service, it's not something that we are going to be inclusive of anymore, right? It will simply cost.
Any other comments or questions on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? All those, oh, that carries unanimously. Casual part-time bylaw hours. Any comments or questions on this one? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor
Through
Wilkinson.
the chair, sorry, it was phrased differently previously in terms of removal or inclusion.
Sorry, so this is to remove $21,000 and,
Just to be clear, yeah, okay.
yeah, $21,500 worth of part-time bylaw hours is what the motion is. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, and that is defeated. Parking fines, so this is for budgeting for a revenue addition of $6,000. So keeping in mind, that's why it's a risk of operating deficit. It's essentially changing what we're assuming we're going to make in parking fines. So all those in favor? And that carries. The archives project, any questions or comments on this one? Councillor Martin?
Can I just ask another question on what we just approved? And I didn't get a chance to vote against it. You just assumed that,
There were 4 votes, so
yeah, so it passed. So
it
I
did.
understand that, fair enough.
Oh.
But then, so what does this mean? What have we, because I think parking fines are good. Like, people parked on streets over the weekend when there was so much snow. And really, I think we should be fining them. So are
So
we
it's-
saying we're not going to fine them?
No, it's our projection of what revenues we're going to make from parking fines. It's raising up what we assume in our budget to be revenue that we generate. So essentially, the assumption here that's been made is that we think more people are going to make parking infractions that we're going to ticket. It's not, again, it's an assumption that's made in a budget. It's not a guarantee that we're going to have that money. More so, we just can't budget for a deficit. So it's one tool that's used. But it really is an assumption, and it's not going to change the practice of our bylaw ticketing. Archives project, any questions or comments on this? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor to remove the project? All those opposed? Okay, that's defeated. Community grants program, any questions or comment on this one? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I'm just wanting to get an idea of, through you, Mayor, what we're talking here in terms of all community grants or a portion thereof. I can't remember what our total numbers are, to Director Catania.
Director.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Cressman, that would, this number reflects all for the community grants. Back in January at budget, we had a budget for $70,000. Council removed $15,000 out of it. This is the remaining $55,000 for the program.
Any other comments or questions, councillors? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? And that's defeated. Elimination of seasonal community service guide, questions or comments? Okay, seeing no, oh, Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Director Catania. Remind me again what this is. I can imagine what it might be, but I want to be sure I know.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this item represents 2 seasonal guides that we would go to print with to provide to the community of all the different community services recreation programs that are out there. We launched one last fall, and we are going to continue on with this program for 2 this year in 2025.
Any other questions or comments on this one, councillors? Seeing none, all those in favor to remove? All those opposed? And that's defeated. Neville Street utility costs, questions or comments? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I did forget to ask a question about this earlier. Could you elaborate on what you mean by utility costs? Are we assuming that you're going to run the building more efficient and thus is a surplus, or how are we getting this number? Or are we just turning off the hydro and the gas?
Lower the heat.
Yeah.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Wilkinson, this is an updated projection. We were looking at full year operations, obviously, for 2025. We ran with our actuals through 2024 and using it for 6 months. This is just a refined number so that we're able to provide a little bit more savings. That our basically our usage that we've had from 6 months, we're able to find it better this way for 2025.
Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, so really this is going to happen regardless of how we vote, is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, correct. We have to keep the lights on. We have to continue to run our operations department through that Parks Department and through fire. And correct, but we believe that with our projections, the updated budget can show a savings of about $7,000.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? All right, all those in favor of this one? Okay, that's unanimous, very good. The Wilmot Rec Center room rentals, so again, this is predicting or assuming a higher revenue assumption for room rentals. Questions or comments on this one, councillors? Seeing none, all those in favor? And all those opposed? Okay, that's defeated. The WRC ice rentals, again, this is a revenue projection assumption being made. Any other questions or comments on this one? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor. Again, we're assuming this is doable by focusing on daytime rentals, correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Cressman, that's correct. Just wanted to elaborate a little bit further on this item. We had decreased for 2025 the revenue out of the WRC ice only because of the capital program that we have in the spring. But we feel confident with our capital program that capital work with the refrigeration plant is going to be done sooner, so we don't feel like we're going to be losing that revenue piece. That's why we've included in here to meet that target.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Cressman?
So if we remove it, we're assuming you can hit this target, right?
Yes, that is the assumption. Okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? Councillor Sadhu, are you abstaining?
I apologize, there was a bit of a lag. I'm in favor.
That's okay. All right, so it was passed unanimously then. WRC aquatic rentals and admissions, again, this is an assumption on increased revenues from what the current budgeted amount is. Any other questions or comments on this one? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, again, I'd like a little more detail through you, Mayor, from Director Catania.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Cressman, staff have put together just an updated projection with revenue. We've been very efficient of taking registrants specifically for our swimming lessons off wait lists and being able to double them up in our program. And, and with that as well, we're able to generate a little bit more revenue and maximize that pool space. So we're projecting that we can, hit the extra 25,000 that we've targeted.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And then reduced park seasonal, which again, this is staff hours essentially. Any comments or questions on this one? Councillor Cressman?
Always like to know what I'm spending or not spending money on or somebody else's money on. Through you, Mayor, is this, it's the horticulture, it's the clipping the grass, it's having long grass in the outfield for the ball diamonds. Is this what I'm reading here?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Cressman, yes, it's a level or a change in level of service, and as well, we're looking at garden beds as well, weeding, stuff that most people really don't want to potentially do, but there are a piece as well that obviously makes our community proud.
Any other questions or comments on this one, councillors? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? And that's defeated. On to fire services, the training budget. Any other questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? And that's defeated. Emergency call out, all those in favor? Are there questions or comments on this one? No, okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's defeated. Clothing, personal protection equipment. Any other questions or comments on this? All those in favor? All those opposed? And equipment repairs, to clarify, that is defeated. Equipment repairs and maintenance, questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? That's defeated. Minor capital replacements, any questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? That's defeated. And vehicle repairs, oh, sorry, I just did that one. On to infrastructure services. Oh, I didn't do that one. Okay, vehicle repairs and maintenance, I'm losing track of where we are. Questions or comments? This is for fire services specifically. Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? And that's defeated. Infrastructure services, this is for increased mileage. Questions or comments on this one before we vote? Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'd like to understand that one a little bit more. Is that coming from Mr. Clark?
That would be Director Molynhuis.
Through you, Chair. So the mileage increase is related to the capital request that was deferred, I guess, from the engineering vehicle. So what we had advised was that if we were to take that capital purchase out for the new vehicle, that we would have to increase mileage as a result. So that's the mileage increase making its way into the operating budget.
Any other questions or comments on this one? Oh, Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Director Molynhuis. So isn't this inevitable regardless of how we vote?
Through you, yes, it would be. Again, I think it's similar to what the chief had mentioned. This is just putting into the budget, into the operating budget, what was a result of the capital discussions and just showing it to you for transparency.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? That's defeated. Engineering summer student hours. Questions or comments on this one? Councillor Cressman?
As through you, Mayor, to Director Molynhuis, as I read this, this would put the ability to hit our complete projects on time. This is what we're saying in terms of an overview of us pulling this funding?
Through you, Mayor. So for the engineering summer student, the tasks that this position would do would be related to, we'll say, minor inspections, stuff that we would send them out to look at some of the smaller order capital projects, but then we would also primarily have this role do things like traffic counts for us. And so that supports the traffic calming initiative and that part of the program through engineering services. This is a reduction of hours. And so this translates obviously to a cost, and that's what's presented here, is that we would just reduce the hours associated with that position, and that would be the equivalent cost.
Okay, Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Director Molynhuis, for those part-time positions, do we ensure that the applicants are from Wilmot? Or that the hire is from Wilmot, from one of our own?
Through you, Mayor. So when we put out positions, I think we would take in applications from anywhere. I would suggest that we do like to have a Waterloo region area, we'll say, in terms of students, but that's not to say we would preclude anyone from applying or that we would offer them a position based on where they live.
Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Director Molynhuis. Do we specifically investigate summer student grants that the federal government makes available from time to time?
Through you, Mayor, yes, I believe that we do.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? To remove these extra hours, essentially. Okay, all those opposed? And that is defeated. On to department and item, the header just didn't transfer. It's still infrastructure services. Engineering contracted services. Questions or comments on this, councillors? Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, Director Molyneux, give me further detail on this, please.
Through you, Mayor. So this is a line that's also associated with some of the programs we deliver in terms of traffic calming. So this is where we would have an element of contracted services for transportation engineering expertise in some specific cases. We're just reducing that budget amount, and this is just a small portion of that.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's defeated. Development, engineering, revenue. Questions or comments, Councillor Cressman?
Through you, Mayor, to Director Molyneux, you know what the question is for the rest of us, not just myself, but for the council.
Through you, Mayor. So this item, you would notice in the line by line, just to give you some context, we have actually made this a, we'll call it a cost center, development engineering. And so you can see in that particular area, we'll say isolating our revenues and our expenses specific to that program. This is just additional revenue that we would associate with the development engineering portion of the work we do.
Any other questions or comments at this time then? Okay, seeing none, so all those in favor? Okay, sorry, where was that going, Councillor Cressman? Opposed? Okay, all those opposed? That's defeated. Boundary road maintenance. Councillor Cressman, do you have a question on this one? No? Okay. Any other questions, councillors? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? That's defeated. Municipal drain revenue. So again, this would be making the assumption that we'd be making more revenue from our municipal drains than what's the current assumption in the budget. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, perhaps you can elaborate on how exactly we make revenue off of our municipal drains?
I'm looking to you, Clerk Boss, as our municipal drain expert.
Through you, Mayor Salonen. So in previous years, we haven't been billing out for maintenance that was done on municipal drains. And according to the Drainage Act, as well as the engineer reports that are adopted for each drain, there is a maintenance clause that maintenance should be billed out to the owners per the assessment schedule. So this is something that we plan to do this spring between infrastructure services, clerks, and finance.
Councillor Martin?
So through you, Mayor Salonen, so I need a little help understanding how we vote then. So you're going to do this regardless, or this could be done if we approve it?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, we will be doing this billing regardless, but this would help include that revenue in the budget.
Yes, so the difference would be as if we don't choose to make this change, then we're still taxing the tax base $20,000 that we will actually be making in revenue going forward for the year. So this one is a little bit of an easier risk than some of the other assumed rental revenue risks that we had earlier. Councillor Cressman?
Through you, Mayor, to the clerk. So this, we get into these double negatives, really is what we, so anyway.
Yes. All right. Any other questions on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? All right, that carries. And then into development services, so economic.
Can I ask a question
Yes,
for learning,
Councillor.
or are we not, I don't know if we have time, but I'm curious why Councillor Cressman voted against it. Maybe I'm trying to understand what are the pros and cons. So I'm not critical of his vote. I'm just curious what it means one way or the other. That is it okay to talk about that, or?
I will allow a quick reply. Please note this is not becoming status quo, and please keep it very short, Councillor Cressman.
It was my interpretation of the question that having it included and not removing it shows a truer picture of revenue and expenses.
Okay. All right. On to development services. So we have the economic development marketing budget line. Any questions or comments on this? Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through Mayor. Director Okrafka, what would be the impact? We're always trying to get new businesses, and so I was wondering what the impact would be.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Dunstall. Essentially, I don't believe there would be any impact of removing the marketing and supplies shown there. They were included in the 2024 budget, as you recall, as a contingency should they be needed, with the promise that they would not be spent unless they were needed, and they were not needed. This is essentially showing the true picture of what we would anticipate spending. Should a special need come up, we would be able to return to council with a request for additional funding. So from that perspective, it was believed that it would be appropriate to follow through on last year's addition and highlight that it wasn't spent in 2024, and therefore we are comfortable removing it from the 2025 budget.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions on the marketing one? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries. All those opposed? Okay. Then the economic development supplies. Questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? That carries. Economic development for minor capital. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries. That is through that list of items. We will move along then. That's essentially report 10.1.1 dispensed of. So now we do have item 10.1.2, which is the cost of living adjustment. So just as a reminder that this motion was brought forward earlier throughout our budget deliberations, and council decided to put this motion essentially to the very end of deliberations. Councillor Cressman, did you have a question of clarification?
Yeah,
yes.
a question of clarification of what we just completed. Is there a running total, or are we going to have that?
There is going to be one. I'm giving staff a few minutes before putting them on the spot for it. But yes, staff are currently running the numbers. So once we have that, it will be reported back. Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, the 2.5% is actually 2.21 or something like that. Is that correct?
Sorry, Councillor, are you referring to the cost of living?
Oh, it's COLA. For COLA, the impact on our taxpayers was not going to actually be 2.5%. It was going to be 2.21 because of the way we have our percentages. Is that correct, CAO Clark? Maybe I misunderstood.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. Sorry, I was just doing the math there. Yeah, so 2.5% is the cost of living adjustment to compensation. 2.11% is the impact to tax increase. That is correct.
Okay. Before we go into other questions, this is not even on the floor yet, so I'm going to ask that council refrain from questions until I get to the point of this getting on the floor. I'm still giving the preamble of what has been brought back and what council is about to deal with. So council requested that this be at the very end of our operational budget. Again, keeping in mind, after we dispense of this item, if there are still other items that councillors want to bring forward as amendments, that is perfectly fine, and we will do that. So the recommendation that was deferred is that the 2025 operating budget be amended to remove the proposed 2.5% cost of living adjustment for staff compensation and replace it with a 0% cost of living adjustment, resulting in a reduction in the operational budget of $257,624, which is a 2.11% tax rate impact. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by, is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Now the motion is on the floor. do councillors have additional questions? I will preemptively answer one. Council can either look to make amendments if they want to see a different number from the 2.5, or depending on how the vote goes, if council does decide to support this, then it's 0%. However, if council defeats it, somebody can still bring forward a motion to change the 2.5%. It just can't be a motion to bring forward changing it to 0 if it gets defeated. Just to clarify in case people had questions on this part. So, open to questions or comments on this item. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I'm in favor of this motion moving forward. I think looking at historical practice over the last number of years, we've seen some pretty considerable increases. It's not to discount what our staff do and not to say that they aren't deserving of such, but looking at current market conditions and the potential that we face as a country and how that may impact our economic situation, I look at this and I sort of look around and look at our peers and citizens that live here. Not everybody gets a regular cost of living adjustment, and I think asking right now for taxpayers or citizens to potentially take this on, I'd like to see it postponed or looked at differently next year, but this year I'm in favor of leaving the wages as status quo and therefore would support the motion as it stands.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this motion, councillors? All right, Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I'm going to be voting against this motion. I think we have a situation in this township that has occurred over a number of years. I think trying to balance the budget on the backs of our staff is totally wrong. I think the cost of living was actually over 3%, so this 2.5 is under the cost of living July to July, and as such, I think they're getting a bit of a haircut on this, and as such, I would see this as important that we have a cost of living included in the adjustment. I would, although I'm not going to make the amendment now, I would see the importance of flatlining instead of having council's remuneration tied to this COLA, that we set an example and flatline our own salary.
Are you alluding to a motion that you're going to be bringing forward later today, or are you trying to make?
I'm going to bring it forward later today based on the results.
Okay, very good. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Councillor Cressman brought up a good point, and I just want to verify, CEO Clark, was it 3.38? Was that what COLA was, and we reduced it to 2.5? I can't remember the exact number.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, that is correct. The year over year was 3.38% for CPI.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? I am just going to quickly throw in my thoughts. I'm not in support of it going to 0%, especially after council just readjusted the grid last year, and that was due to, in part, sometimes not keeping up with our comparators. So I do think that we're at a competitive disadvantage going forward, / potentially in the next 5 to 10 years, causing the same problem that we just had to do last year, which was a pretty significant impact to the tax base to readjust our whole grid. So I do want to see us keep pace. With that, I'm considering possibly bringing forward a different amount. As being on the regional side, the region went with 2.25%, and we're seeing other municipalities now that their budgets are done ranging from 1% to 2.5%. So I think somewhere in there might be fair to continue to keep up with pace, because also keeping in mind staff are still doing their grid movements. So regardless of COLA, they are still seeing an increase based off of performance on their grid movements. But that is where I stand on that, so I won't be in favor of going to 0. But those are my comments. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? And that is defeated. Councillor Cressman, did you want to bring forward your motion then in dispense of the COLA items now? As it stands right now, COLA is remaining at 2.5, but did you want to, for everybody in the organization, including council?
I would make the motion that council, mayor and council's remuneration be held constant and have a 0% COLA.
Okay, so that's been moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Comments or questions on that item, councillors? Okay, I will make my comments on this one. Working on AMO's board for Healthy Democracies, which is really focused on getting good candidates to run for municipal governance. The reoccurring issue is actually compensation for councils. And I think, again, we're not keeping pace if we don't actually see a COLA change. That's more of on a principle basis. I can appreciate wanting to make the statement that Councillor Cressenden made. Again, for me, on a principles, values perspective, that is another huge issue, is having people interested in these roles. And I won't be in favor of this, but that is why I won't be. Anyways, any other questions or comments, councillors? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And all those opposed? And that carries. Any other questions or comments on cost of living adjustment? I would ask that Councillor Martin could chair so that I could bring forward a motion to change the amount. If you're okay with doing that, Councillor Martin?
So, yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Mayor Salonen, for a potential motion.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. I would bring forward the motion to reduce our cost of living adjustment to 2%, based off of other comparables across the province and keeping in mind our budget issues that we do have here, but still giving staff an increase that'll keep us competitive on our grid. So 2% is what I'm proposing we bring it to.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Salonen. Is there a seconder? Councillor Cressman, or sorry, Councillor Wilkinson, I looked too far. So we have a seconder. Are there questions or comments on this motion? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I mean, I know I was hoping for more, but I will take any savings we can get. So in that case, I'm looking to support it. Thinking in terms of putting it in line with what our municipal comparators are, seems reasonable.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through your chair. Sorry, CAO Clark, do you know what that impact would be if it went down to 2% from 2.5?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor, the dollar impact is $51,525, which is about a 0.42% tax rate decrease.
Thank you to both of you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then I will call the question. All those in favor? So I see 1, 2, 3. All those opposed? So it's not carried.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martin, for chairing. So that then dispenses with cost of living unless anybody else has motions they want to bring forward on it. Okay, seeing none. So now we do have our motion as amended by all the changes that we've done on the main budget. I would look if staff do have that number or if we need to take a recess to wait for that number to come back.
If you could give me 5 minutes.
Okay, we will take a 5-minute recess to give staff time to make the final conclusions. Yes, can I please have a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All in favor? That carries unanimously. We will return in 5 minutes. May I have a motion to reconvene at 3:51 PM? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. So up on the screen here is the new budget motion as amended through all the amendments that we had just made. And that has brought us to a 17.56% tax increase from last year. I will let you read the numbers there because I'll be honest, they're a little bit blurry from this distance, but the percentage that we are now at is 17.56%. Before we vote on that, do councillors have any other questions, amendments, motions? Councillor Cressman.
Yes, just through you, Mayor, to Acting CEO Clark, that does not include the overage on the capital budget. That is correct. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. No, the amount outstanding within the capital budget can be dealt with through the capital budget. It doesn't necessarily have to be an increase on the operating. There are other methods we can deal with that. But if a councillor wanted to make a final adjustment to fund that, now would be the time and place to do that. If not, we'll deal with it through capital, through reserve and project management.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have the long list in front of me, but there were operating gap requests that I believe we were going to revisit at the end of the process. For example, revenue supervisor, I've got a note here that we didn't actually totally fund that.
If you give me just a moment to connect with staff on that one. Councillor Wilkinson, just while staff are going through, my memory, I thought that we dealt with each item one by one. Do you? Okay, so it was a deferral from the time that we went through one by one is what your recollection is? Okay.
Through the chair, yes, it's my recollection. That's what my note says, but if I'm incorrect.
Okay. No, that's okay. It's more so giving areas to look for properly.
Thank you.
Yes, just a moment. We can make a motion.
Through Mayor Salonen to Councillor Wilkinson. That item was considered on January 16th, and in the minutes, there was no vote that occurred deferring the consideration of it. If you recall, during that meeting, we put motions on the floor to remove items. So seeing as there was no vote to remove the item, at this time it is included in the budget. And if you would like to bring forward a motion to remove it, you could do that as an amendment at this time.
Through the chair, then I would look to put that motion on the floor. Again, in the spirit of looking to save, and I know that there's potential opportunities here, but I think just speaking out loud, I potentially could see that money being more useful potentially in another position. So I don't want to bundle it, but I would look to remove the revenue supervisor funding.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Questions or comments on this, councillors? Councillor Martin?
Sorry for not being up to speed yet. I'm trying to remember. Do you know what page that is? So 5. Okay.
Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. If I remember correctly, this was a situation where when we looked at the amount of employees compared to the amount of work that was being processed, we had one employee covering, I forget what the number was, compared to other municipalities that had 2 and 3 employees covering the same amount. Is that correct, Mr. Clark? Am I remembering that right?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, yes, that is that discussion. We looked at Woolwich and a couple other comparators at the same level, and our staffing levels were in general, 1 to 2 staff positions less when you looked at that entire finance area.
Thank you.
Just if you're following along, I'm making sure that council has the opportunity to get the correct information in front of them before we call the vote. But if any other councillors have questions at this time, otherwise I will just give you a few more minutes to kind of make sure that you know what we're voting on. Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to CAO Clark, in terms of the gap positions, it was my understanding that we had left that one in. Was there any other one that we left in? I thought there was 2 at the end of the day that were included.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, 2 positions were left in, the senior policy planner and the revenue supervisor.
Sorry, through you, Mayor Salonen, what was the other positions that we left? Policy planner, okay. So I do have another question through you, Mayor Salonen. Just to clarify, we took out the grants coordinator, is that correct? No.
Yes, that is.
And just in terms of procedure, are we in this motion now, Councillor Wilkinson? And so we can only focus on that motion for that?
Correct.
Okay.
For this moment, yes. Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I guess this is kind of a question, but maybe it's a statement of my beliefs. Going to you, Acting CEO Clark, I thought that your department, the finance department that is, has been short-staffed, and so this seems like an important position. I don't know if there's more that can be said on that. I mean, I know you responded to Councillor Dunstall's question, but my worry if we vote against this position that we're running short-staffed in that finance.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, yes, the purpose of this position is the fact that we have, in essence, one finance position dedicated to billing related to both water, wastewater, utility billing, as well as all of our tax billing, with a manager overseeing them and a customer service clerk at the front who's also responsible for account opening, closers, checks, and all that stuff. So it's not, so we only have one person who's dedicated to this role, whereas other municipalities our size have 2 or 3 people.
Any other questions or comments on the revenue and taxation supervisor role that's currently up for question to remove? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. So just a reminder, this would be voting to remove this item from the budget, just so that we're all on the same page here. So all those in favor? All those opposed? And that is defeated. Were there, again, this would be the time to bring forward any other motions or motions to reconsider, anything like that. Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, can I ask a question? Instead of putting forward a motion, could I check out if other council members might have similar thoughts, or do I have to put forward a motion in order to test that out?
So I think just to stick with procedure, I'd be looking for it through, I guess technically the language would be an amendment because we do have the main budget motion on the floor. I get and appreciate what you're saying. I think just so that it doesn't turn into a bit of anarchy, we'll stick with, if there is something you want to know about it, just put forward an amendment. If it's seconded.
So I'll do that. So I'll put forward an amendment that we put back in the grants coordinator. We have had some discussion with some people in the township who are making recommendations of what we can do in terms of funding some of our projects, and without this position, maybe we're missing out. I know our staff do an excellent job of going after grants, but I wonder if we had that position, if it would be helpful.
I see we have a seconder. The clerk is just confirming because I believe it was an actual vote through motion to remove it. if that be the case, then we just have to do a reconsideration. So I'm going to let the clerk confirm that. Sorry to make the confusion on the amendment motion thing. Again, procedural bylaw is quite particular. So if you'll just give us a moment, and the clerk will find those details for us. So what the clerk has pulled up is that it was a motion carried. So to do a reconsideration, it requires somebody who voted in favor of removing it would need to be the one to bring forward the motion to reconsider. So do you recall how you voted? If you didn't, the clerk said she can look it up.
I thought I voted to keep that position in, but maybe I'm wrong.
Okay, then you would not be able to support it. It would have to be somebody who voted in favor of what the motion was, which was to remove it, for that to be brought forward. Councillor Cressman, are you looking to do that?
I would so move.
Okay, so that's now been moved by Councillor Cressman. I just need to confirm on the seconder part. Councillor Martin, you could second now that the motion's been put forward. Okay, seconded by Councillor Martin. Councillor Cressman for comment.
Yes, through you, Mayor. I'd like to speak in support of this. It's been brought to, I think, many of our attention of an appointment of a journalist graduate who fulfilled this position very successfully in one of the townships in the Niagara region, and was worth their weight in, well, I better phrase it differently. They were very successful in securing grants. So I think we can look at an entry-level position here, nothing ventured, nothing gained, and I believe we will, if we recruit the right individual. Again, I'm not sure it's the journalistic bent or what it is, but somebody who's an excellent writer is the key to give that an opportunity. And I don't know what we put as a placeholder for salary, but that would be what I would be looking at, less than the number here. Yeah, I would hope that we could do it for.
Amended.
Okay. So I would.
Councillor, can you just give one quick moment here?
Yeah.
Are you looking to actually change essentially the amount that the role would be in effect, essentially the level of the role? Because if so, that might change. That's a completely different motion, and we
Okay.
don't need to do a reconsideration, which would be, yes, save us a step if that's what you're trying to achieve. I'm not trying to preempt what you're doing, but if it's to bring it in at a different price point than what staff brought forward, it would just be a new motion because we wouldn't be reconsidering what was formally considered by council already.
I never knew I was that transparent. Yes, I am looking at bringing in a different amount, and it's a suggestion as a junior position, as an entry-level position, and seeing what that brings to the table in this capacity.
Is there a particular price point that you would have council consider for that job then, so that it can obviously be budgeted? Entry level, I think, is open to interpretation, and I think council giving the best direction would be.
I would need HR assistance, but I don't know if 70,000 is a entry-level graduate. It's a little different from somebody who graduated in the 60s.
Okay.
I can help.
I will look over to Director Clark on that.
So through council, or through the mayor to the councillor, based on our current compensation structure, the lowest level positions that we have, all-in compensation budget is just under 80,000, so 79,940. So that includes CPP, OMERS, everything. So that's the all-in. So that's 79,940, which is a reduction of 12 and 20, 32,000 from the current position, roughly.
That sounds like a reasonable number. Thank you.
Okay, so, sorry for all the confusion. Councillor Cressman, because you want to bring in that position but at a different amount, would you be open to removing your motion to reconsider, because we're technically not reconsidering, this is actually a new...
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that has now been removed. And now, Councillor Cressman, you're moving a motion to bring in this position with a inclusive range to the 79,000 and change. Okay, and this is for the grants. Councillor Martin, are you still good with, okay, seconding that? Very good. Sorry for the confusion on that. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for the assistance.
No worries, we'll get there in the end. Councillor Dunstall first and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. CEO Clark, do I remember correctly that we had discussed the grant person being able to look at grants not only for the township but for some of our organizations like the Legion or the Optimist, that kind of thing? I remember having that discussion. Is that included in the role that this person would play?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, while it's not outside the realm of possibility, I think there would have to be a very firm set of parameters, because grant application could escalate quite quickly when you look at community groups and their ability to I think the intention of this was just for township purposes. However, if council were to direct us to work with particular partners, I think that could be part of the work portfolio. I do caution, though, that could quite quickly escalate to take a significant portion of their time away from the core function of getting grant money for the township.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I'll be honest, I struggle with anything that will increase the operating costs at this point. However, examining or re-examining this position and having some community conversations, I think it's very interesting, the proposition, because it in essence presents an opportunity for a position to essentially pay for itself. And I think when we look at the long-term revenue that this should generate by way of seeing grants come our way to help pay for a lot of the investment challenges we're having, this ultimately, while painful to see the cost of our operating budget increase, will essentially help us pay dividends long-term and really return back to the community. So yes, this is a good position.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? Okay, so seeing none, just to clarify, this is to add a grant position to the township with a maximum of $79,000 and change. Again, I don't remember those exact numbers there. And it would fulfill essentially the same duties that are more or less outlined in the original proposal from staff. So seeing no other questions or comments, I will call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Any additional motions, amendments, I guess, sorry, would be the correct word, or comments or questions? Okay, not seeing any. I did have a question in relation to vacancies. Currently, how many staff vacancies do we have? Again, Director Clark, I know that you're aware I'm looking more so at the long-term vacancy positions and looking at what the budget connected to those unfilled positions are.
So through you, to you, Madam Mayor, we currently have 5 full-time positions that we're in the process of recruiting and hiring for. 4 of those are at the stage where we've completed interviews, and in some cases offer letters have gone out and been accepted. One of those we have paused filling at this time, and that's the Supervisor of Development Engineering. I can let Director Mullenhouse speak longer, or speak to the actual reasons or rationale behind that, but in terms of budget, if you give me 1 second, I didn't have that ready for me, but to give you the all-in budget.
While you're pulling up the budget with that item, Director Mollenhuis, would you like to speak to what that position is?
Through you, Mayor. So the Supervisor of Development Engineering position was approved in last year's budget, and what we had looked to do this year was sort of align the hiring with the expected increase in development engineering work. So the employment lands, for example, we did, I guess in terms of the role that position would have, overseeing some of the construction aspect with staff, but supervising through the tasks that are needed there. We've actually delayed hiring that specific role because we'll say the development engineering side hasn't come to fruition as much as or as quickly as we had thought. And so we've delayed the hiring of that particular role. That role would be funded through what I had mentioned before in terms of the cost center for development engineering, where it is entirely funded through development fees and deferred development revenue, and those are all entirely development related. They're not necessarily anything that comes through, we'll say the tax base, but yeah, so the long and the short of it is we've delayed that because of the timing of development activity.
So then just to clarify, the only outstanding long-term vacant role that we have that's not in the middle of being hired for does not have a direct impact on the tax levy then? I'm looking to Director Clark or Director Mollenhuis, either or.
Through you, Mayor, that's correct.
That's correct. Okay, thank you. In that case, I don't need to know the affiliated costing part because that idea goes out the window. Any other questions, councillors, changes to the operating budget at this time? If not, I would ask that the motion now as further amended with the new numbers be put up, if we do have the new numbers in there. Staff are just asking for another quick recess just to get the numbers up for us. So if I could have a mover and seconder for that, please. Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. We will return in about 5 minutes with those updated numbers. All right, councillors, if I could have a motion to reconvene, please. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin, and that's at 4:20 p.m. that we're reconvening. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And so now we are back to if anybody has any final amendments that they wanted to bring. If not, we do have our new motion as amended. And that is that the 2025 operating budget be approved as gross expenditure budget of $29,278,441. Oh my gosh, I don't know why I can't read today numbers. $29,278,441 with a 2025 property tax and payment in lieu of taxes levy requirement of $14,430,322 or 18.22% over 2024. Any final comments, questions, or amendments? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, in terms of procedure, we still have yet to discuss the capital budget, correct?
Correct. So in terms of procedure, it will be the operating that gets dispensed of through this motion, and then we go into the capital proponent. Unless you have question or rationale as to otherwise.
Well, maybe just to clarify, in essence, where we're at, this is the main budget motion, but this percentage does not include what has been approved for capital as well, correct? Is that what I'm reading?
I will get our director, Clark, to clarify.
So this includes the funding that goes to the capital reserves that funds the capital budget. What's not approved is the package of projects that will be funded from those reserves and other funding sources.
So through the chair, just to clarify, we're not looking at 18.22 plus 9%, right? Correct. Okay. Then I understood it correctly.
Any other questions or comments before we vote on the main operating budget motion? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I speak for myself here. I mean, I personally would like to see this number come in a lot lower. However, I would anticipate that if I were to put forward a motion, I don't know that it would be approved. So, you know, at this point, just stating for the record where I'm at in terms of really desiring this to be lower, and I would like to see a recorded vote on the main budget motion, please.
Okay. Any other, Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment. I mean, we've just come off of, you know, taking a look at all the previous years that councils have voted and not voted and cut, which ended up putting us in the situation that we're in now. So I think this is a good budget and I'll be in favor.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Cressman.
Yes, through you, Mayor. Certainly it'd be my opinion that I would like to see a lower number as well, but I think the reality of the situation dictates that we have to do what is best for the long-term interest of this township. I mean, it's going to hit each of us in a different way. I'm one that came close to $10,000 worth of taxes last year for my operation, so this is going to have a significant impact. And I realize there's others that are paying slightly more and some less. And so I think it's not that we ignore those who are in difficult situations, but I think as well, we can't leave a legacy of empty bank accounts, empty reserves, and a situation where we're looking over our shoulders every year determining where we're going to find the funds to keep this township solvent. So I think we have to look at this as being very difficult medicine, but it's medicine that is needed for the long-term interest of the township.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? All right, then I will just summarize with my points. Similar to what council has shared, I also would love to see a lower number. However, I know certainly myself, I ran for fiscal responsibility. At the time, did I maybe think that we had better accounts? Yes. I remember back to our very first budget meeting, I believe, Councillor Cressman, you said it looks like we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Which turns out, you know, we do then have to come up with that funding to make our corporation sustainable, frankly. So with that, although it is a tough decision, I will be supporting this budget. I think that council, along with staff, have done a very good job going from what the staff draft budget of 50% was to bring it to something that I think is more palatable and attainable for our residents. And I think that was also really clear through our residents being really engaged throughout this budget process. So thank you to everyone in the community as well. And I just want to also note that, you know, this council has not been through a single budget process that has been the same over now 3 years. And I really hope that some of the policy changes that we also made and asks that we made for 2026, we will be putting our community in a better position going forward. And this will be kind of the stepping stone to a better financial future and health for the corporation of our township. And I know that there were a lot of great things in the budget that we weren't able to include this year, but hopefully by making the steps we have in the future, we will be able to have more nice to haves versus a lot of the necessaries. So anyways, I won't stay on my soapbox any longer and I will call the vote. So I will turn it over to the clerk, actually. Sorry, it's a recorded vote.
Councillor Cressman?
In favor?
Councillor Wilkinson?
Opposed?
Councillor Sadoo?
Opposed?
Councillor Dunstall?
In favor?
Councillor Martin?
In favor.
Mayor Salonen?
In favor.
That carries.
So now we are moving on to the capital portion of today's meeting, and that is starting at report 10.2. The recommendation is that the 2025 capital budget in the gross expenditure amount of $12,010,326, inclusive of the following, which is funding transfers from capital reserve funds and other sources, including partnerships and grants in 2025. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. I will turn it over to Director Clark to provide an overview.
Through you, Mayor, to Council, and thank you for the introduction there. As the motion states, staff have taken away based on the 9% that Council gave us direction to include in the 2025 budget, and come back with a list of projects that approximately fits within that envelope. So we've looked at things that are health and safety related, risk related, critical infrastructure projects that are partially underway and need final funding. And that is the list that's attached for your consideration for approval as the appendix, the second appendix that's attached to the agenda. And you'll notice highlighted in yellow are projects that staff have pushed out and deferred till 2026 for consideration. And really the biggest one I want to highlight there is fire, and we've had some conversations around that. At the end of the day, those fire apparatus are still required and still need to be replaced, and so they're not going anywhere. They're just not in 2025, as well as the station. And I do want to remind Council that the budget for the design of the new station has been approved, and so that work will be being carried out to bring back to Council an estimate for the cost of construction of the new station, along with the timing and financing of that as we get into 2026. Councillor Cressman has highlighted that there is a bit of a difference between the funding of about $250,000. That can be accommodated through reserve cash flow management of timing of projects, so it's not a significant bump. In my previous experience, we generally had more robust reserves, so you wouldn't necessarily have to have this year's funding equal this year's projects. You usually had a little bit of flexibility, so that level is still manageable within our portfolio. If council did want to reduce the projects, that's been included in the memo of how much tax funding is required for each of those projects. So if council did make a decision to defer an additional project, then that discrepancy would be reduced a little bit further. But there is no need at this time to actually make changes for us to be able to proceed with the capital program put in front of you. It just has a effect in terms of reserve balances and those types of things going forward.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments or anything that council would like to do with this? Okay. Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I'm trying to look at, I guess was it in the appendix, I was looking at Carmel Cook Road and the parking at the side of the road, and it was still included, I thought, or was I looking at it? And I thought we handed that off to Rare in terms of looking at we having a very minor piece of that and they trying to find funding to accommodate that. So I guess through you, Mayor, to Director Molinos.
Through you, Mayor, yeah, so that is, you are correct, that was, my council was asked to be removed. We do have a report coming forward that will speak to that item, and it does, it is actually a cost-sharing proposal that will be coming forward in the next, at the next council meeting. However, it is shown here as entirely funded by Township.
That was confusing.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. The project's included on the list, but it is not included by, funded by tax funding. So the tax funding has been removed. So it is approved pending partner funding is the idea. Yes. And then as to Director Mullenhouse's report, it will come forward with that cost sharing and approval from council at that time. But yes, there is not tax funded at this time in the list of projects.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to CEO Clark. Is there anything else in there that, in that appendix, that would be of similar description?
Through you, Madam Mayor, a significant portion of the projects have some type of split, especially when it comes to engineering. And so in the memo, the last page of the memo reflects the tax funding portion of each project. So that's where you can see the impact. For example, something like Victoria Street, 694,000 of tax funding versus a total project budget, wow, that's really small, of $5 million. So the last page of the memo shows you the actual impact to the taxes, and that's the piece that is funded from that envelope that's related to the 9%.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments, councillors? Seeing none, I will call the vote then. All those in favor? And all those opposed? And that is carried. On to report 10.3, and this is the 10-year capital budget plan. The recommendation is that the 10-year capital budget plan as presented be received for information. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman, and I will turn it back over to Director Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the 10-year capital plan that's been included, this is the same one that was brought to council back January 27th. I think it was first presented to council, and I know it was only presented, I think, about a day in advance of that meeting. So I appreciate that council didn't have time to look at it at that point. This reflects previous approaches to 10-year planning, where a large number of projects were put into the 10-year capital plan that didn't necessarily have funding sources. So there was no adequate reserve funding, no adequate contributions to reserves to actually facilitate the long-term sustainability of that plan. And so the memo that was provided on the 27th sort of breaks down that need for additional funding. Now that council has given direction to include 9% increases for each of the next 3 years to tax funding, we will be able to rebuild that 10-year capital plan. And so over the summer, we'll be carrying out that work, bringing that back to council pre-budget. So the intention is to bring it back by the end of the summer and present to council what a new 10-year forecast looks like, what's fundable, what's not fundable, and what those types of levels of funding would be longer term as well, beyond the next 3 years, and so the council can have some pre-indication of what budget's going to look like. And so there's a lot of work to be done. So this is just a representation of all the projects that have sort of sat on a 10-year plan as of last year. It is not really an indication of what the 10-year capital plan will look like going forward.
Any questions or comments on this, councillors? Again, this is to be received for information. Seeing none, all those in favor? And opposed? And that's carried. I don't have any announcements, as those will be at tonight's meeting. There was no business arising from closed for this meeting, so we have the confirmatory bylaw. May I have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And adjournment for this meeting. May I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. Lots of hands up in this case. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. And we will see the rest of you back at 7 p.m. for our regular council meeting.